Hey guys, so this is going to be sort of a quick unscripted look at the 3D scene from my Rift video. I will preface this by saying that if you're here because you're interested in learning 3D modeling, I'm probably not the best resource for that. I'm like 99% self-taught, so I've certainly got some bad habits or, maybe backwards ways of doing things. Likewise, if you're here because you're on the fence about purchasing Cheetah3D, I'm probably also not the best resource for that. I make a very specific sort of, I'd say like 90s style CGI scene, kind of basic. Cheetah3D is certainly capable of, far more than that in the right hands. So, again, probably not the right resource. But if you are interested in looking at this specific type of scene, we'll take a look at it now. So this is the scene, and when I say it's basic, I mean it's basic. I mean, other than the chairs, the entire scene is, just a cylinder for the actual hull of the airplane, and then up here for the, cargo holds, it's just, two very elongated cubes. That being said, it's a very, very simple scene where each view takes a very, very long time to render. Unfortunately, just because of the nature of, ray traced lighting, it's the metal on these chairs and the metal sort of, strip surrounding this front door. If I was making this scene again, I would probably not actually have these reflective. I would probably just use some sort of baked-in texture to sort of, mimic the inside of the airplane. And again, like, this is something you don't really see in the final product as it is. Like, it really adds absolutely nothing to have all the light bouncing around. The first thing I actually modeled for this scene was the chairs, because in my mind, once I made the chairs, everything else would kind of, fall in place around it, size-wise, dimension-wise. And that's exactly how it played out. I created these rows of chairs in a separate project, and I imported them here and put in the floor, and it's literally just a flat plane, and I, just put my rows of chairs down and built the hull of a plane around it. And I do that a lot. I'm sure, I could sit here in the sidebar and I could, make sure that I'm placing everything at even intervals. But, when you sort of set deadlines for yourself, that's sort of the nature of, releasing things online these days. You kind of have to pick your battles with it. So the chairs are all just kind of eyeballed. The windows too, they're slightly unevenly placed, but none of that actually matters in the final product. I mean, it's there to tell the story, to be the visual for the story, and it does that. Something else you sort of quickly learn, well, I guess two things you sort of quickly learn with 3D modeling is you don't want to sort of mimic real-life dimensions at all times. I mean, just for the sake of making a better scene. Obviously, if you've been on an airplane in real life, this sort of, cargo hold with the buttons to call the stewardess and the little, lights, they are certainly not this far up off of the seats. I mean, in our sort of plane scene here, I mean, you would have to stand completely up and still reach to, reach this panel up top. So just for the sake of making the scene, a little more, navigable and making the, individual shots, look a little bit better, that's just a decision I made, is to sort of, make this distance a little better just because it gives me a little more room to sort of, have my camera in here. Likewise, this gap down next to the seats, I mean, you clearly in real life would not see, this much curvature on the, outer wall of the plane like this. But, it makes for a better scene because I can just sort of, more room for me to angle the camera in and out without actually, turning parts of the scenery on and off. The other thing you quickly learn is that sort of light has to come from somewhere. I've made some, far more basic scenes than this, if you can even imagine such a thing. that just, don't have any lamps, don't actually have any light sources in the scene, but, there is clearly light. But I sort of learned my lesson early on that light actually needs to come from somewhere. So kind of twofold on these ceiling lights. These white boxes are not actually, where the light is coming from. That's just a cube with, a emissive texture on it that sort of simulates a lamp in the scene. These squares, these white squares lower is actually, where our scene light is actually coming from. Because, what you learn is, if it's up here, it sort of just casts strange shadows around these, boxes down into your scene, which is not what you want. So you want the illusion that the light is coming from here. Sort of same thing with this overhead light. If we sort of zoom in on that, it's just not a cylinder, a disc here of just an emissive, that actually has the purpose in the scene of, making it seem like the overhead light is shining down on our, narrator's drink and, tray table here. But the actual light is, slightly lower. And that is a spotlight, to sort of give that cool, noir, like light cone effect that fits the narrative well. We also have these little assets up front. One is our logo for our fake airline here. And the other is just sort of this, safety placard. You wouldn't really see this type of thing in a plane in real life, but, that's sort of the aesthetic of my work in general, is that everything is, slightly off. And, even the wording of all of this, if you want to pause and read it, is, it's all very strange and off-putting. And, if you saw this on a plane in real life, I don't think you would take the flight. Speaking of lighting, there is also lighting coming in from, outside the plane in the scene. It's just a textureless, Cheetah3D calls it an HDRI light. I don't really understand it. My 3D modeling skills are, sort of very basic, but it's basically a way of putting a, cylinder of light around a scene. And there are, basically HD images you use to sort of project that light into the scene. But we're really not using it for its intended purpose here. It's literally just sort of a 0.5 boost of light around the scene. It's just a decision I made while I was making it. As for outside of the plane, I mean, again, just very, very basic. You can see just sort of my quick and dirty cylinder with, two sort of caps on it acting as the bulkhead. And the entirety of the sky that you see in the scene is just these large flat planes on either side. And, if you've ever used any, image editing software, literally it's just 1920 by 1080 canvas gradient tool, light orange to slightly darker orange, and export. And, that poses as the, sort of exterior scene of our plane here. Back on the topic of lighting, I certainly could have made the scene a lot more easy to render with baked-in lighting. Unfortunately, while I understand what baked-in lighting is, I understand what it looks like, I understand what it does, I don't actually understand how baked-in lighting works in Cheetah3D. Something I should learn at one point, but again, my scenes are very, very basic, and, I only do like a maximum. I think that this will probably be the first video of this series that you guys see. There are, a couple more in the pipeline. I'm not really sure of the release order yet. I do very, very basic scenes that normally only have, 3 or 4 lights in them, and I only do, 10 to 12 renders per video. So if I have to wait 5 minutes on a scene to render, it's not really, that big of a deal. This glass, is sort of the, focal point of the, part of the narrative of this actual story. It's literally just a cylinder with a disc and a glass texture, and then, I put this, Skywell Airlines logo on the side, and it is, looking at my textures here at the bottom are my materials. It's quite literally just the same as the, sort of poster for the airline up front with, a very slight amount of, shine attached to it. One of the things, oddly, that I fought with in this scene is these red buttons, or these orange buttons. They would be, sort of call buttons in real life. If you go back and, look at the actual video, you'll see that in the sort of scene, these don't actually put off any light, but they are glowing. And, I desperately wanted that in my scene, to sort of really give that, evening or like very early morning flight look of where, everything's sort of dark and, you've always got that one idiot that won't turn their overhead light off. But, you sort of look down the scene and you just see these, lit call buttons. And that's something I wanted. And I fought with it and fought with it. And originally, each one of these was a very, very dim point, what Cheetah3D calls a point light, and it's just a fixed, point in the scene. And, if it takes 5 minutes to render with just this much light in the scene, my test renders were, 15, 20 minutes per shot with, each one of these being their own light. So in the end, I just settled on this orange texture, make it slightly shiny, and, make it emissive, as Cheetah3D calls it. I don't know what other, 3D modeling packages call it. So it is a lit object in the scene that is not, affected by other light in the scene, but it doesn't put off any light, I guess is the best way to see it. And, for my context, for my purposes, it did what it was supposed to do. So, if you go back and you look at the original scene, this simple little detail is something I fought with. Anyway, there's not really that much more to talk about with this particular scene. I mean, obviously, it's, very, very, very simple and, very straightforward. There's only kind of so many details I can talk about. Anyway, feel free to, chat down in the comments, tell me, maybe things I could have done better, maybe, mistakes I'm making. I'm always, wanting to learn more about this. Until next time, that's kind of it, guys.